It's the Paris Chong Show. It's the Paris Chong Show, show. It's the Paris Chong Show. Hey, I feel like I haven't been here in forever. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming back and seeing and hearing the Paris Chong Show. I am Paris, and I'm here, and this is Disco, my sidekick, and I'm here with my dear friend, another dear friend. You can only be on the show if you're a dear friend, Crescenzo Notarile. Notarile. And he is an amazing cinematographer. I met him many years ago through my friend Dennis Illick, who was hosting a party and at his awesome studio in
Yes.
Hollywood, and he was so excited you were coming.
That's very
That he was
sweet.
acting like God just showed up, and I'm like,
He's
"Who
a
is this
sweetheart.
guy?" Yeah, and you kind of look like you could be from that era of God. You could have been.
Well,
You could have
because
been in the Ten Commandments. You would have probably been cast in that. And so he was so excited that you were coming and said the nicest things about you. And so I was like, I've got to know this guy.
That's very sweet.
Yeah.
Thank you for
So
saying that,
welcome.
Paris.
Thank you for coming here.
It's an honor to be here, and I appreciate your warm invitation.
Well, I can't
that tickled
imagine.
my heart.
Yay.
Thank you. It's
Well,
a privilege.
you're a privilege.
Thank you.
It's a privilege to have you here. Why do I feel shorter than you? It's because is your hair higher than mine?
Well,
Is
you
that-
shouldn't be short. You got the stilettos on
I
today,
love these
see.
shoes. It looks
Thank
like
you.
you just got done painting a masterpiece. Do you paint?
A little.
Yeah,
I do
but
paint a
I
little.
do know that you have a lovely art collection.
I do.
Yeah.
I grew up with art. You know, my mother and my father, they both were artists.
Oh.
So that was really strong influence in my life. My mother was a sculptress, an interior designer. My father was a painter, an illustrator, a graphic designer. He was a true madman on Madison Avenue advertising.
Wow.
He was an art director. His work is in a permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art.
That
My
is
father's
amazing.
work. So I grew up with a lot of art. They collected a lot of art. I had a lot of art books in the house. It was a tremendous influence. So, as I said to you before, ever since I was 5, I knew I wanted to be a photographer. And I think it was a kind of an innate thing because when I was a little baby, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, my father used to take him underneath his arm to his work sometimes. And his photographer, my father's photographer at the time, was the famed Richard Avedon. He was one of my father's photographers. So I used to see Richard Avedon with a host of other photographers shoot product shots and fashion photography for my father. And I was a young boy.
How did I not know this?
Yes. So I was a young boy, and all I got was the stimuli of all these flash umbrellas going off, beautiful music playing on the sound systems, Polaroids being snapped off all over the floor. And I saw all of that. After the shoots, I used to grab all the Polaroids, put them in my pocket, and go home and look at the Polaroids. A lot of times I would sniff the Polaroids, if they rubbed it with the fixer, it was a really beautiful smell. And I have a shoebox filled with Polaroids from that era.
You're kidding. You have Avedon Polaroids?
I do. And to be honest with you, maybe 98% of it is destroyed and really, fainted away. Some of them are still there. I know I have some that's worth something, but they are there. So anyway, my point is I grew up with art. My father, when I was a small boy, I think I was 5 at the time, my father gave me a small plastic 2 1/4 medium format Instamatic camera. And I used to put the 2 1/4 film in there, take photographs of my family. I was learning to do family portraits, which I still have from that camera. And I used to develop that film in my parents' bathroom. I learned how to develop.
How old were you?
5, 6, 7 years old.
What?
Yes. So I knew I wanted to be a photographer. Then I went to school for photography, and I won a scholarship through my photography.
Wow.
In my last year of education, I changed photography into cinematography. And how that happened was there was a professor that I had. His name was Manfred Kirshheimer. He was a filmmaker as well. And he showed an episode of Twilight Zone to the class. And we were in a photography class. So that was quite interesting for that alone. Like, why are we seeing in a film when we're in a photography class? But he showed it to us. It was a very famous, very rare episode of Twilight Zone. It was called Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, and it was about the North and the South Civil War, and they were opposed to each other. It was a war, and the opening shot was this: the soldier was ready to be hung. He had the noose around his neck.
Yeah.
He was ready to be hung. Cut to, an event happened. He got free. He escaped, and you see this whole film of him escaping and having a life thereafter. And then at the very end of the film, you would come back to that very, very same opening shot of him with the noose around his neck,
Mm.
and he gets hung. So, wow, I got blown away. Oh my God, this story took place in a split second in this man's mind when he was ready to be hung. And that concept of time and to tell that story fascinated me so much that I wanted to change my vocation from photography to cinematography. And when I was studying my photography, I didn't know at the time, but I was in my way telling stories as well, because I was a photographer when I was in high school for Newsday
Mm-hmm.
newspaper. And my thing was doing photo essays. I would find a subject and do 4, 5, 6 photographs of that subject to tell a story. So that's what I was doing before I became a cinematographer. I was actually telling stories through my photography. So it was all that influence. It's a long answer, but my parents growing up with art, being appreciated with art, being influenced with tremendous stimuli that was out there affected my life. It's in my DNA,
It
it's in my
really is.
chromosomes. My father, and my mother, they're both no longer with me right now, but they were truly my mentors.
I know it
They were
sounds like it,
truly my
and I'm
mentors.
so sorry your mother just
Yeah,
recently passed.
last
I know,
year.
but
Yeah, that was a tough one.
yeah, I'm sorry.
That was, thank you. Thank you.
It's an awful thing to happen. But you are a good son. I know that.
I do my best.
Yeah,
I
well,
try,
so your
I
parents, so
try.
you had, it was just inbred in you, and it was gonna happen no matter what happened in your life. You
I
were gonna
think
do
I
this.
think
Yeah.
so. I was destined. Yes.
Yeah. Now I know you collect art, and I remember you telling me a story. So Crescenzo's with the ASC, and as you all probably know, there was a huge writers' strike here, and there was a lot of
Yes.
changes going on in California
In the
with
industry,
in the
yes.
industry. So things were slow
Yes.
and weird here in Los
Everything got
Angeles.
redeveloped, the whole
Off,
platform
yeah,
changed.
everything changed, and then we just went through the COVID and now the fires. So
It's
things are
been a
just,
tough 5 years
it's been hard on
for us
LA.
filmmakers in this
Yeah,
industry. Very,
yeah.
very tough.
But you were, but when you were working, you were doing Gotham for a long time, right?
Yes, I was doing Gotham. Before Gotham, I was doing a franchise that we all know, CSI.
Mm-hmm.
I was on the mothership CSI,
Right.
the original one, CSI, the Vegas one.
Right.
There was a lot of spin-offs from that, but I was on the mothership one with Lawrence Fishburne
Oh, I
and
love
Ted
him.
Danson as the lead actor. From there, I went on to Gotham. From Gotham, I went on to the Star Trek franchise.
Right.
I was up in Canada doing Star Trek Discovery. Then I came back down to Los Angeles and I did Star Trek Picard. Did several years on that. From Star Trek Picard, I went on to a Showtime show called Your Honor, starring Bryan Cranston. So I've been doing television for the past decade,
Mm-hmm.
and it's crazy because once you get into that genre of work, you kind of get sucked in
Mm.
because there's a lot of executive producers, a lot of showrunners. So when they go from one job to the next, hopefully you did a good job where they call you back and you show your loyalty, your professionalism. It becomes a family. And then before you know it, you're on one show after another with the same people, and you're not stuck in that genre, but you're in that genre for quite a while.
Mm.
Before that, I started off, doing music videos,
Right.
which was a great genre for me to learn and to have my
It
chops.
must be fun
It
too.
was fantastically fun. I traveled around the world. What was great about it, it was very experimental, very revolutionary,
Mm-hmm.
because there was no one on your backs other than the artists themselves and record company execs. But you had free form to do whatever you wanted to interpret the music your way with a director and a cinematographer. There was no account executives, no
Oh,
studio networks on your back. You didn't have a
nice.
monitor with 19,000 people behind your back telling you what to do. You had free form, creative license to do whatever you wanted. And we were all trained to think way out of the box.
That's
we
good.
wanted to really strike a nerve with this new genre, music videos. I was there since day one at that era. And it was quite interesting because we would come up with outrageous ideas in cinema that no normal person doing work at the time would think of.
Right.
Like, speed ramping the camera, you know, changing the frame rate of the camera when you're moving, going from slow motion to normal frame rate to maybe fast motion. We call that a speed rate within a shot. And we would ramp up the camera to things like that. There were times where the lens would be on the turret of the camera,
Mm.
and I'm shooting a close up of the performer singing, David Bowie or what have you. And I would literally take the lens off the mount of the camera and take it off a bit and put it back on and jiggle it a bit. Who would think of that? But we
Right.
would do that in music videos. What the result of that was, you would get this frenetic jitter in certain moments of the lyrics and singing, or some kinds light would leak into the turret, and you would get these beautiful impressionistic flash frames. And it was a great thing. And then that led to, flash frame photography. We would literally flash the frames. We would get hand crank cameras, which was my favorite. These old 1920s, 30s, hand crank cameras where we would literally crank the
Oh, geez.
cameras. And that was a beautiful thing because by hand cranking the camera, you could crank it in certain speeds. So you would get fast motion and slow motion to the performance, depending on how you're cranking. But what I loved about hand cranking cameras is at one point you're cranking forward, and then all of a sudden you crank it backwards for a half a second or 2 seconds and then go back forward. So what the result was, you would get an overlap.
Wow.
You would get a beautiful impressionistic overlap of forward motion, backwards motion, flash frames, and it would become so artistic and a beautiful expression of what this genre was now about: music, expressing your creative, whimsicals. And it was such a beautiful art form. From commercials, from music videos, I went to commercials. From commercials, I went on to shooting, motion picture films.
Right.
I did a few motion picture films. And then from there, September 11th happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I told my agent, I really don't want to travel as much as I was. Every 2, 3 days of the week, I would be on different continents. I would literally take the Concorde um, 2 times a week
Wow.
sometimes. 2 times a week between JFK
Yeah.
and Heathrow Airport. I was going back and forth to London shooting these music videos, and it was crazy.
The good old days. I've been
It
on the
was great.
Concorde twice. It was amazing.
It was a great experience. The Concorde, it was
Mm-hmm.
very strange that you couldn't stand up
No, I
straight.
have no. I tell
You
everybody that
know,
you can't stand up. You have to kind of crunch in. Now just quickly about your music videos. Is there some videos that you've done that people that are listening might have seen that you're really proud of?
Oh, well, there's so many. I've shot literally over 800 music videos,
Mm.
Paris, literally over 800. And
Whoa.
how I know that is I always keep my crew sheets, my call sheets,
Yeah.
and my time cards.
Right.
I put them in a loose leaf book and I collect them. So one day I literally went through all of them and I collected how many I did in a course of, 18, 20 years. And I literally done over 800 music videos. But there's been a bunch of iconic music videos. I mean,
Like what?
U2, Where the
Okay.
Streets Have No Name,
Oh wow.
which became a very iconic music
Right.
videos.
Exactly.
To
Who's
be on,
booking you for those?
sorry.
Who books you for the music videos? The
Well, at
band or
those
the record
at
company?
those days, it was the director and the band,
Okay.
and then from there they would put the name forward to the record company commissioners.
Okay.
The record company commissioners, would hire the directors first. You would have like 3 or 4 directors that the commissioners would think about. I like this director, I like that director, and they would write a treatment for the song. A lot of times the director would speak to me if I had a relationship. Hear the song, Crescenzo, I'm up for this job. What do you think? If you got any ideas,
Cool.
please share it with me. I need to write a treatment and submit it to the record company. And then a record company commission would choose one treatment that he or she loved that would really portray strongly with a song.
Right.
I'm sure they would discuss this with the artists themselves. And then the director, would hire me. It was never a question. Nowadays you got to go through this whole bureaucratic, you know, roster of network, studio, all these people that have to hire you. And it's not only the director, which is very peculiar
Yeah.
because, as a cinematographer, you're with a director side by side, shoulder to shoulder. So the process is really whacked right now.
Yeah.
Very frustrating right now.
Is it? So it's the director even when you're doing television, they hire you, the director chooses the cinematographer?
You would think,
Oh,
as I was saying before, you would think that's the way it should be.
yeah.
But the director has to submit now
Oh dear.
my name, the cinematographer's name, to the network, to the studios.
Wow.
They have their own list of people that they have worked with them before.
Yeah.
They have the
They're
list.
trying to
It's in
schmooze
their
their
computers,
people.
you know, and you got to get approved by them first. So, it's a very difficult thing because when you're a cinematographer and you're up for a job, you're up with a lot of other people. I'm not just competing with my own roster in my own agency, but there's, dozens of agencies else out there, and you're dealing with competition with their list of rosters of cinematographers. Then, you got to get your reel on their desks. They got to look through your reel. They got to see if they love your reel. Then a long list of, like, 15 people becomes a short list of,
Oh.
10 people. Then you're on a very short list of, okay, we're going to meet 3 to 5 people. Then you have a Zoom meeting. You go through that whole process
So
of the
it's
executive producer, the network, the studios. They're all in there listening to you. You got to pitch yourself, sell yourself, come up with your ideas, and they're really picking your brain.
so it's extremely competitive.
Extremely.
Extremely competitive to be a cinematographer, and I meet so many young guys and girls nowadays. They all want to
Yes.
be cinematographers. What advice do you have? Knowing that it's such a competitive business, what advice do you have for all these young people that want to do this for a profession?
Want to do this as a cinematographer, or
Hmm.
what does it take to be a
What does
cinematographer?
it take to be a
To be a
cinematographer? Yeah.
cinematographer. Okay, because those are two very different dynamics of questions there. I always answer this, like sometimes when I'm in a seminar giving lectures to students,
Can you go down?
that is a very quintessential question that a young student would ask you first.
Right.
And since we're here in your
And
podcast,
since I am a young student.
since we're here in your podcast, Paris, which is you're part of Leica in the photography family, I always tell my students that you have to be a photographer first
Hmm.
before you become a cinematographer. And I make that very, very clear to the students.
Makes sense.
And their eyes go wide open. What does that mean? And then I get into that whole conversation of what photography is about. What is the difference between a photograph and a picture? We all take pictures. We all see pictures through
Hmm.
magazines, whatever. We're inundated with pictures. Everyone takes pictures, but not everyone takes photographs. So, what's the difference? Then I go into that spiel about the difference. A photograph is evoking a narrative, evoking a story, evoking an intrigue of what you see through those four frame lines inside of that box that's captured in that so-called decisive moment of when that photographer pushed that shutter down, which can be a thousandth of a second.
Yeah.
Why did he click that at that time to capture that moment? All right. So now you see this photograph and you feel something. You feel a narrative. You feel a story. You don't necessarily feel those emotions when you're looking at pictures.
Right.
So I tell a student, okay, you have to have a camera on you if you want to be a cinematographer, to be a photographer first, whether it's a pocket camera, a
Right.
small DSLR camera
Anything.
around your neck, an iPhone, anything. And you're taking pictures, hundreds of pictures every day until one day, out of those two, three, 400 pictures that you took in a day, now you're seeing maybe five of them that maybe can be photographs.
Right.
Now your aesthetics are starting to shift a bit. All right, so now instead of taking everything eye line, now maybe sometimes you're getting lower with the camera. Maybe
Hmm.
sometimes you're lying your belly on the ground, shooting up at something and giving something a very heroic presence. So now you're shifting the dynamics in the pictures. You're evoking a narrative in your photographs by giving this person stature, power. Why? Because you just lowered the camera.
Hmm.
So, you apply these things when you take photographs. To me, I love geometry, compositions, Uh,
You can see that in your work.
Compositions is a very religious to me when it comes to a photograph, because I've been trained when I look at things, I look at geometry. Like I'm looking at you right now, Paris, and you're in a wedge of a wall. So
I like that.
I see the forced perspective of the wall behind you. I see the lines of the wall, and I also see the depth with a picture frame and the sofa in the background. I have this frame here in the foreground
Yeah.
in my peripheral vision. So there's geometry there. I have a box of frame here. Look at the lines of this painting here. I'm looking at you very monochromatic with all your black fashion against the white wall, but the yellow chair is a pop of zest there. So
Mm.
I'm looking at you very
That's a good
nonchalantly having a
description.
conversation.
Yeah.
But what makes an artist is they see things in their peripheral vision, in their aesthetics, in their chemistry, some of which is innate, a lot of which is learned.
Hmm.
It's not all innate, but you got to start with that innateness, I feel, to know that you have something that's in you biologically that's innate. You have to discover that. Then it's up to you now to nourish that and to water that seed and let it blossom. So I'm looking at you. I saw this geometry here. And that to me makes a great photograph. So what do I do with that geometry? Do I place it in my composition? Do I get wider to incorporate that? Or do I want to lose that because maybe I find that too distracting and I want to concentrate on you subconsciously for the audience? Maybe I'll push in a bit with my frame to
Uh-huh.
lose that a bit. Okay, I have that. Maybe I want to now bring the camera a little lower to give it a little more stature,
Bigger
you
boots.
know? Well,
Thank
then
you.
I would move in
Thank
with a
you.
wider angle lens. How-
So I'm all hairy now. So forgive me, everyone. Disco got me hairy. Well, no, I see that in your what you're describing right now. I see in your work when I'm lucky enough and privileged enough to curate for the American Society of Cinematographers, the
That's a
ASC, where
beautiful thing,
well,
Paris.
every year for their still life show. It used to be spring and fall, but after COVID, it's now the fall show.
And we love you at the
I
ASC.
love it's one of the most things I'm most proud of, to be able to work with the women, the men and women of the ASC. The best cameramen and in the world are at the ASC, and I feel so lucky to get to work with all of
By
you.
the way,
And
pardon me for the audience in case they don't know what ASC means. It means the American Society of Cinematographers. It's a very, very elite
prestigious,
society
yeah.
in the globe, for
And you
cinematographers.
have to get voted in, and you have to get 3 letters of recommendation, and it's just
But
and
you also have to have a body of work first,
yeah,
of course.
you have to be good. And they have a clubhouse in Hollywood that's very I have been living in Los Angeles for over 30 years, and I never knew that was there because it's
Very,
behind
very
all the
famous
hedges.
place,
And
yes.
when I went in there, I'm like, "What is this place?" And it's just this beautiful, prestigious building that's been there for over 100 years.
Yes,
And
over
you just
100.
walk in there, and you just can feel the energy and the ghosts
Do
and
you ever feel ghosts when you're in
oh my
Paris?
God.
Honestly, because I
I have
do.
had some creepy things happen.
Yeah.
I was in the bar area one
That's
time
where
waiting.
they are. They hang
Yeah.
out in the
I was
bar.
sitting there waiting for something, and I was creeped out of my I was scared. I'm like, "Ah!" Yeah, but it wasn't a bad ghost, but
You
it
know,
still
when
was
I'm
a
there at the
ghost.
bar, I get a little wind sometimes in my ear,
It's
thinking that someone, a colleague of mine maybe, is behind
yeah,
me,
no one's there.
tapping me, and I look and there's like no one there.
That's right.
But I
But someone said
felt a
them.
wind, a whisper in
Yep,
my hair, in my
yep.
ear.
It's I know
And
what
it's
you're
kind of
talking.
creepy at
It is
times.
creepy. In the
But
middle of the day, I've been terrified in there, and I'm not kidding you. It's because sometimes there's a lot of people in there, sometimes there's hardly anybody
yes,
in there. But Alex was telling me the rug moves all the time.
I heard that story not that
The
long ago.
rug moves all the
Yes.
time. Well, if you have the opportunity to come to one of the shows or you get invited to the ASC, I highly recommend going to visit this place. It's incredible. It's in Hollywood. It's
What
amazing.
I love, if I may interrupt for a
Yeah.
quick second, what I love most of all with that ASC slash like your show
Mm,
curating it is extraordinary, and especially me as a cinematographer, where I have so many people that inspire me, so many wonderful, legendary cinematographers that inspire my work as a cinematographer. But what's great about that show, it's so wonderful to see the shift of their personal
yeah.
aesthetics change from cinematography when you know their films to their photography, which is encapsulated
It's
in one
amazing.
frame.
Yeah.
And it's just them, singular, individual. You don't have a crew of hundreds of people and a whole list of people that's part of your project, part of your film, and everyone changing the thumbprints at times. It's a very collaborative medium,
It's gorgeous, and the
cinematography.
work's
But with the
gorgeous.
photography, it's very individual. It's just you.
Yep.
It's one frame. So I find it very, very fascinating that when I'm very, very familiar with someone's films, sometimes Academy Award winning films,
Yeah.
and then you see their stills, a lot of times you're blown away and you're inspired. And I will be honest with you, and it's all personal choice.
Yeah.
It's a very subjective thing. There's no right or wrong about how we see. Sometimes I will scratch my head and I say to them, that's a very interesting perspective,
Mhm.
and then you start to study that a bit. Sometimes you come around full circle to understand what they were doing. Sometimes you never get there.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting thing that you learn from that personal thumbprint, what the photographs represent from a cinematographer's stance.
It's a real
And
treat
you
to
must
see
have a
that.
challenge when you choose these
It's
photographs.
hard. It's hard because I look at photographs all day long, but I mean, but the stuff that I see from the cinematographers really just it blows my mind. And speaking of Academy Award winners, we have a show coming up for 100 Years of Leica,
Yeah,
and
big one.
Greg Fraser, who won the Academy Award a couple years ago for Dune, and who's up again for another
Yes,
award
he
this year,
is.
as well as Best Picture. We have a Dune show with Greg Fraser and Josh Brolin. I'm really excited
Extraordinary.
about that show. That's
Extraordinary.
coming up at the
I will be there.
yeah, February 10th, and we had to push the show back because of the fires. It was
And you
so.
did the right thing because it
I'm
was
who
during that
nobody wants
week.
to celebrate. I still don't even know what's happening now. And Greg's busy. He lives in the UK, so it was kind of hard to get him back here again. But the only time he could be here was on a. He said he could either do it Sunday, February 9th, or the next day, February
Oh,
10th.
I
It's
see.
like Super
Okay.
Bowl Sunday. I'm like, bad idea. You can't do
Ooh,
it on
that's a
Super
bad
Bowl
idea.
Sunday. It's like a national holiday in America.
It
So he said, "Well,
is.
I have a plane to catch Monday night, but I could do it that night." So I'm actually really
Oh, okay,
excited to
good.
do it on a Monday night, especially because everything's so strange in LA right now with what's happened. So many people have lost their homes, and there's a lot of people that were our clients that lost their homes, and there's a little bit of a I think you can attest to this, that there's a little bit of a sad zombie vibe going on here in Los Angeles
That's
when people are walking around just like
that's an understatement,
still in
Paris.
shock. That's how I describe it, as a
It's an
sad
understatement.
zombie vibe. So
And especially, not to talk selfishly, I'm in the motion picture industry, so
mm,
it's my industry, and in my industry, 90% of my colleagues, 90% of my crew have lost their
I
homes.
hate
I
hearing
mean,
this.
burnt to the
Yeah,
ground,
my best friend
lost their homes.
hate it.
So when they're calling you up to see how you're doing,
Oh,
and you go like this, I survived, but then they start sending you photographs of their homes that are burnt down. It makes you
it's so sad.
speechless. You get gutted. You start to weep. You start to understand what's going on here, the severity of what happened. And people are in their bubbles.
Mhm.
They don't actually know the severity or the emotional dynamic of this. And
Mm-mm.
I have to be honest with you, I get a little annoyed when people say, don't worry about it. It's just things.
Uh,
I hear that, and they're right to a large extent. And it's easy to say that when you're
when it's not
afar,
your
when
things.
it's not your things.
Yeah.
But yes, half of your stuff, whatever you have, things are things. Yes, they can be replaced, a sofa, couch, whatever. But what people don't talk about, the emotion, is half the other things are things that you have acquired,
Mhm.
have collected, have inherited,
Mhm.
family
And
heirlooms,
are not
artwork
replaceable.
that you struggled 5 years to earn money to collect, this piece of artwork that represented something to you personally, that you succeeded in something, you wanted to reward yourself with
Yeah.
something. That's why I fill my house with artwork,
I can't wait
because
to see.
I like being in that womb of art and surrounding myself where I can look at my walls and get inspired. And it's a reflection of me
Mhm.
when I think about my 40 years career, and I travel all around the world. And when I travel, I try to purchase a piece of art
Yeah.
of where I am in every crevice around the world. and I bring it home with me. So
Yeah, no,
my house is filled.
I love art.
So when you lose that, how could that not take a chunk
Yeah,
out of you? That cannot be replaced.
it's
It
true.
cannot be
It's
replaced.
true, and you know what? You were the one of the first people to call me to reach out to me. I wasn't in the danger zone. I live 2 blocks away from here. I wasn't in any harm's way, but you were one of the first people to call me. "Are you okay? Do you need
Yeah.
help? Does anyone that you know need help? I can help. I have a somewhere to stay. I can help someone move." You offered right away. That's how this man is. You're so sweet
Well,
like
I
that.
got pretty touched by the whole
It was
situation.
and it's still and it's still every day people are showing us pictures of their cameras that burnt. This really lovely
Yeah.
lady came in and she said, all I have is the clothes I had on my back. I didn't think it was as serious as it was because we've been evacuated before. I didn't think this was going to happen. And she was like, it was
I'll
heartbreaking.
tell you something that made me physically cry. One of my crew members, a very direct crew member of mine that worked with me many, many times, many jobs. We did 4 jobs back to back together. My last 4 jobs, he was with me, and back to back. And he finally had money to buy a Leica.
Oh God.
He bought his first Leica.
And it's gone.
His house, he lives in Altadena, got burnt, and
Oh,
he showed me a photograph of his camera burnt to a
we're
crisp on
getting
the
a lot of
ground.
those photographs. I could do a whole new show
And
with that
it
series.
hit me. It hit me.
It's
He
bad.
struggled to buy his
I
first
know, I
Leica.
hate
He was
hearing that
so
story.
proud
Sorry
that he
with his
bought his
friend.
first Leica, and I cried. And that's when it hits you.
Since we're talking about tragedy, and then we're going to bring it back up and get it happy again. There's a story I wanted you to share that you told me at lunch not that long ago, which actually was probably 6 months ago. Now that I think about it, it seems
Around
like
that,
yesterday.
yes.
But we were having lunch, and Crescenzo was telling me about when he lived in New York. I guess you were doing a
Oh,
lot of
that
music
story.
videos, and you had
Yes.
a friend who had to evacuate because
Yeah.
of 9/11.
Yes.
So, would you mind
Yeah. Well,
resharing that
very
story?
simply, I mean, it was a very horrific time in my life, and for all of us as Americans, and especially us New Yorkers.
Mm,
I have a loft in Soho, a giant loft in Soho. That's where I lived, and at that time, the September 11th happened, and we all saw that first crash on the news. We're
yep.
all watching
Yep.
the morning news shows. We saw the first plane hit on the news, so we all thought, okay, that's an accident. You hear the newscasters speak, and they don't know what's going on right now. They all thought it was an accident first. So me and a lot of my neighbors and New Yorkers, we immediately ran down to the site of the World Trade Center. I lived 4 blocks away from
Oh,
there.
Jesus.
I put my camera around my neck, took my elevator down, and I literally ran 4 blocks to the World Trade Center. And there I am, right on the front steps of the World Trade Center. And you see the first plane, the damage that it did. It's on fire. Everyone is taking photographs. We're not hearing the news now at this time, so we don't know what's going on. All we see now is the fire, a hole in the wall of the World Trades, and all this mayhem, street mayhem. So we're all taking photographs, and at one point, I'm taking photographs, and I moved my camera to my side, and I'm just zeroing in, and I actually see people on the ledge, and I was so close. You would see the decision making
Oh,
process
God.
of people's expressions. Do I lean forward and fall and jump? They would look behind them. Do I burn? Do I jump? Do I burn? They would look
I hate
up
this story.
thinking what to do, and then 3 4 people would come. You would see this holding hands with each other, and then they would just tip, and you would see that. So to answer your question, a friend of mine, he lived right next to the World Trade Center. I think it was Bedford Street, and he was not allowed to go into his building because of what happened.
Mhm.
Obviously, I'm going to retract for a second. Then all of a sudden, when I shoot, I always have both eyes open. So as I'm shooting in my peripheral vision, I see another plane entering my frame. Crazy. So 2 planes hit. Now we're thinking, okay, this is very strange, very peculiar, very surreal. This is not an accident. 2 in a row. Oh my God. So your mind is playing games with you now. And it was a very interesting experience to understand what the mind is doing and how it's manifesting into the physicality of your body. and how you dynamically your mind is shifting and the synapses in your head. But I have to tell you, Paris, what blew my mind with everyone else is in our collective consciousness, we never thought of the trades falling down.
Yeah, no.
So when they start to crumble right before our eyes, I can't even describe it. Everyone's running for their dear lives. It was an amazing situation. Um, and to progress for a second, I'm sorry. My friend lived in a building right next to there. He had a nice, beautiful loft, and he was not allowed to get into the loft for like 2 weeks. He stayed with me for a good amount of that time. But when he was allowed to go back in, I happened to be with him, and I happened to have my camera around my neck. So I'm with him. We take the elevator up. He gets his key out of his pocket, puts it into his door, into his loft, opens up the door. We walk in, and right before us, there's a brick wall, a big gaping hole,
Mm,
and what's on the floor is the seat of an airplane with a burnt crevice, burnt to a crisp, still with a seatbelt on, but burnt.
this is just the
And
craziest.
it was a remarkable thing to see. We took photographs. I took photographs. I had a lot of my photographs at the time in galleries
Mm,
that were in Soho. We were all sharing photographs. And I'm very, very proud to say, I mean, we all took horrific photographs. But there was one day that I just went around my neighborhood of Soho and parts of Tribeca, and I took photographs of American flags. Everyone that was living there had American flags in their windows, hanging from their windows. So I took pictures of American flags, hundreds of them,
love it.
of all these windows all around Soho and Tribeca. Some of them were very dramatically presented and draped, and I got my film back. We were developing film at the time. It wasn't digital.
Not
But
yet.
when I looked at my contact sheet and I'm trying to choose what photographs, it dawned on me, wow, these contact sheets are fantastic. It just encapsulated so many wonderful things, elements, flags, neighborhoods, hearts collected, all within one 8 by 10, 11 by 14 sheet of contact sheet. So I decided to blow up one contact sheet, mural size.
Nice.
And I'm very proud to say it was President Clinton at the time who was part of this. Um, I was accepted to be in the permanent 9/11 memorial
I love
installation
that.
with my
I
mural.
that you didn't tell me that part when you told me this
Yes,
story.
so it's
I
in the
love
permanent
that.
collection of a
I would
9/11
like to see
mural.
that photo.
And it says on the top, I have big graphics that says New York. There's the contact sheet. And then on the bottom, it says Home of the Brave.
You need to enter that into the ASC show next time, That would be a goodie.
So I feel proud about that. And and I have a letter from them
Mhm.
signed by President Clinton. Wasn't president at the time, but he was part of that. Um, and they said why they accepted it. And I framed it. I was very, very proud that it was the only piece that they received during that time that was very spirited.
I like it.
Everything else that they've collected was very horrific,
Mhm.
very sad. This was very spirited, very
I
uplifting,
like that.
and that's
Yeah.
why they chose it.
I was in Paris during the terrorist attacks, like 10 years, whenever that was. It was a while ago, and it was so horrible. And I was there for Perry Photo, and that was shut down. And then
Mm,
I walked
I
around
remember that.
with my little Leica Deluxe, and there was still blood stains all over the floors, and it was kind of
You
chaos. But
saw that.
and I just said, you know what? I don't want to take those photos. I want to take. I went around and took pictures of people hugging and kissing and
That's good
making
for
a
you,
yeah,
Paris.
and
That's
took
good that
these
you
really
did that.
happy photos, and
Yeah,
some of the happier photos. I don't like to see negative things anymore. I just don't
yeah.
want to. But okay, so that was our sad story. And so now we're going to take it back to the happy story, which is I had no idea that you worked on Farrah Fawcett for the Playboy
Oh my
film.
God, we're
I
going way back now. Yes.
I love Farrah Fawcett, and I thought
Yeah.
that was
So do
really
I.
ballsy and cool of her to do
Yeah.
that in her
Yeah.
50s, and you were the cinematographer for that?
I was.
Yay.
It was Playboy at the time. We're doing all these Playboy films.
Mhm.
They were pretty known for that at the time, not just for
Yeah.
the magazines, but they were actually doing
Yeah,
films,
artsy they were doing
artsy
artsy
films,
fartsy
for video
films.
releasing.
Perfect.
And they had a big one coming up. It was a big anniversary for Farrah Fawcett.
Yeah,
I was called for that. I was honored by that. I was
I
called.
bet.
So of course I raised my hand. Yes, and I was a big Farrah Fawcett fan, like we all
All
were
of
at
it,
the
all.
time. So yes, I shot the project. It was a wonderful project. It was a project called All of Me,
Mhm.
and it was a very interesting time because Farrah was sort of not in the limelight at the time. She was back further. Then she had a hiatus, dealing with her private life
Yeah.
and all of that. And this was a big anniversary. It was a big thing for Playboy to do
Yeah, I
this
bet.
and to talk her into doing this. Um, so it was a beautiful thing because she and I made a point of this because that's part of my job is that comfort zone,
Mhm.
uh, to know the artist that I'm shooting, that I'm working with, to become close with them. Most of all, to have this communication where they know that they can feel secure with you and that they love you now. But it reached a point now where she loved me so much that she didn't want to do anything unless I was there.
Wow.
She didn't want to have anyone being there unless I was there hearing the conversation when she was in front of camera. So I was honored about that, but I did recognize that I was sort of her security blanket.
Well, I'd be terrified if they were like, "Here's a cinematographer, get naked." I'm like, "This is the guy that I have to get naked in front of." I'd
uh,
be like, "I'm scared."
it was nice, but she was such a
Well, you
sweetheart.
look intimidating, I would be like,
Sure
can
it
I get a
was.
woman or
Sure
like
it was.
maybe a teenage girl?"
You know, and here I am shooting Farrah
Yeah.
freaking Fawcett.
And she loved you and you loved working with it. She
Yes,
seems so sweet. I feel so sad that she died the same day as Michael Jackson and she got no play.
yes,
I'm like,
yes.
wait, Michael Jackson
I
died
saw
with
that.
the
I
same.
recognized
Remember
that.
that?
Yes, I
Well,
did.
first of all, I didn't realize what a huge Michael Jackson fan I was till he died because I couldn't stop crying for 2 weeks.
Oh, is that
And
right?
yeah, and I actually, and I was engaged at the time and getting married, which turned out to be his birthday really soon after that. And I couldn't stop crying because he's a part of your he's
Yes.
inbred in the history of your life, I think, because music is that way.
Yes, he was.
Movies, films, music.
I worked with him as well.
Yeah, I know, I
Yes,
love that, and he must have been a interesting person to work with.
very
Yeah,
much
so
so.
but I cried nonstop for 2 weeks when he died, and I was getting married, and I should have been happy. Maybe I was really crying about getting married, I don't know. So, I think I was, and so but the combination of everything, and it's no offense to my ex-husband, I just didn't wanna get married, but, uh and then she died too, and it
Yeah,
was kinda like Michael Jackson died, and then Farrah Fawcett. And Farrah Fawcett was huge, just
yeah,
as huge
very
as
huge.
Michael
Just as
Jackson, just
huge,
as huge
yes.
as Michael Jackson. I think just not as much international appeal or something, but it just was so downplayed, just like Rick James was. Actually, I want to throw that out there for just to be a weirdo. I thought Rick James died, and no one even said anything.
Yeah,
So there's just a few people that I think were really amazing people, like Farrah Fawcett, Rick James, Donna Summers.
yes,
They
it
die, and
happens
it's
all
no
the
big
time.
deal. Like it's like you don't even hear about it. You don't even know they died. But so Farrah loved you. She's gorgeous.
Yes.
And Michael Jackson, what was he like to work with?
I thought he was a genius,
Well, he
a fantastic artist, of course. Very interesting human being to work with.
was he
Just
nice or a
even,
picky bitch?
uh, no, he was a sweetheart. He was
Mm-hmm.
gentle as a lamb. He was like a little petal of a flower.
Oh,
Um, he knew what he wanted. He was very precise,
good.
very detailed. He wasn't bitchy at all. No, on
I
the
love
contrary,
him.
he definitely had a vision. He was a sweetheart to work with. Yes, very strange, very eccentric, but I
Yeah.
love that in people.
Well,
That's what
that
makes that
happens,
thumbprints.
yeah.
I don't find that negative. In fact, I
Mhm.
love that.
Yeah.
You thrive on that.
I met him one time when I used to work at the record plant. Do you remember the record plant
Of
before people had
course.
home studios? I was a client service girl. I'm like, what do I have to do? But it's just to get free studio time because that's when I wanted to be a singer. And he came in there one day, and I had to decorate his room with Michael Jordan posters, candy machines, popcorn machines, candy, this, that, and the other, all the kids stuffed animals. And I thought, this is nuts. And I was so excited to meet him, but he got out of the car with his umbrella and he
Yeah.
ran in with about 20 young kids. And the one thing I remember about him, he smelled so Good.
Mm,
Like, he must have had a fragrance designed just for him, because it was like, oh, the smell was just like this incredible, beautiful smell I've never smelled ever again, and it was, like, kinda like baby powder, but kinda creepy because
interesting.
he was with kids, so I don't know, but anyways, I'm sad about Michael Jackson.
But
So
hold
now
on a sec. I'll tell you
yeah,
one thing. Speaking of
okay.
Michael Jackson, if I may interrupt,
Yeah.
there was one moment that I will never ever forget that I've experienced working with him, and that is I was about 200 yards away on my camera. I had a 400 millimeter lens on him,
Mhm.
shooting a close up, and this was for a film called Moonwalker. This was a film, and I'm ready to shoot a performance of him. It was
Mhm.
for a song called "Come Together," the Beatles
Oh, right
song.
on.
We did a performance that he was doing, and I'm lining up a shot with a 400 millimeter lens. So I'm like this, and I'm looking through my lens, focusing, and I'm just there. And Michael was just talking to one of his peeps before we were ready to roll the playback, and they were involved in a discussion. But I was looking through my lens, and I would see every crevice, every detail in his face, every surgery, whatever
Oh,
he was doing at the time, which obviously had the makeup on, I have to be careful that I wasn't trying to show it. So,
yeah.
you're dealing with diffusion filters, what have you. But I saw it clear as day. And there was one moment where I looked at his eyes and I was so close that I actually felt and I saw the sadness in
So
his
true, I
eyes.
know.
I took my eye off the eyepiece. Um, my eyes welled.
Mm.
It made me think. Became a little reflective now. And it was a very pivotal thing because from that moment on, I saw him in a different way,
Yeah.
just like that. All of a sudden now, I felt sad for him.
So, well, he has that
I
sadness.
felt sad for him. I never
Yeah, a
felt
sad
that
little
way
kid,
before. Living that kind
boy,
of life, dealing with that kind of fame, and all the problems that come with that.
and the
I
dad,
saw it in his
his
eyes.
dad.
Then cut to, years later, I don't know if you saw it, but, I'm sure you have that documentary that we
Oh,
saw on him.
awful.
That
I don't
was,
wanna believe it,
I
but it
know.
seems like I didn't wanna believe it 'cause I just loved him so
We
much.
all never wanted to believe that.
But I will say that I do believe those 2 guys that were saying that happened to there's no way that they could have been that
Of
sad.
course. Of
I
course.
mean, the one guy, I just believe him, and I hate that. I don't you hate that when there's something that's happening with 2 people that you know, and they both tell you this their side of the story, and they both sound like they're totally telling you the truth, and you believe both of them, but you know that there's some kind of conflict going
Yes.
on, and you know that there's some truth and there's got to be the truth in the middle of both of those stories. Like I've been in the middle of that a lot of times, and I hate that.
Politics.
Yeah.
Let's not
No,
get into that subject.
no, we're not.
Let's not go
Don't.
there.
It's been such a hard year.
Yeah.
The
Speaking of that,
election, the fires, the plane crash this week, which I'm just
yeah.
heartbroken about. Which also, speaking of like 9/11, because I'm going to go happy again, but that Black Hawk, how could that have not seen a plane that close?
Yeah.
The way, and then did you see the way it was coming in? It
Yes.
looked like it
You
was
knew
done.
immediately by that alone, you knew immediately who was,
You know who was
I
at
shouldn't say
fault.
who's at fault
Well,
because there's all this
somebody it's gotta
investigation,
be
but,
someone's fault, but
you
it
know,
just does it sounds very
yeah,
horrible,
it
very,
looked
very
like
horrible. And I
the
love the
pilot of the
I
helicopter was not,
what how could you not see it though?
but he was
And
flying at a wrong altitude, the
I
wrong
don't
height,
know. It makes
darkness,
me so sad, and
training.
our and prayers and prayers to all the families and victims who lost their lives in that horrible tragedy.
That was
I
horrible.
started crying. I'm so sad, and I work and those the U.S. ice skate team, and
Yeah.
it breaks my heart. Now, let's get back to Farrah Fawcett being running around naked, and that's much better. And also, you like to shoot a lot of nudes. You did a book called
I
Nude.
do. Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. And the reason that I do that,
That you're in.
and that I am, there was a self portrait there. Um, People kind of look at you in a different way, when you shoot nudes,
Mm,
because it's very easy to look at a person now and conjure up all these things of why they're doing nudes. There's an intrigue there, of perversity, of
Mm.
weirdness, of things like that.
Yeah.
But when you are a true auteur and a true artist, like all the artists in history,
Yeah.
everyone starts with nudes.
Exactly.
And there's a reason for that. You take an art room full of students who are in a class of drawing, a
Yeah.
class of sculpture, a class of photography, a class of painting. What are they doing first? They're doing nudes.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason why you're doing nudes. It's the purest form, a purest form of structure, of beauty, of lines, of geometry, and you study that. You look at Picasso and Rembrandt and Caravaggio. You look at all these people, all these wonderful artists that do nudes.
Mm-hmm.
I have a wonderful list of favorite photographers that have, inspired me with nudes. My most favorite photographer that have inspired me is Bill Brandt. Another favorite photographer of mine is Joel Peter Whitkin. You look at nude photographers like Helmut Newton,
Yeah.
Robert Mapplethorpe. You look at all these wonderful photographers that do nudes, and you look at Irving Penn. I mean, I look at Irving Penn's breast that he did, and it's just a
Yeah. I mean, that's
breast.
just incredible.
Why did this breast, very simple photograph of a breast, why did that breast go up for auction, you know, busting all the records in photographic history at the time? And I look at the breast and I try to create
Yours
that in my
looks
own
like
way.
yours reminds me of that.
Well, I
Your
try,
photo.
just for a learning exercise, but why did that evoke a certain je ne sais quoi, a certain emotion that, okay, a breast that I took is crap, that doesn't evoke anything,
Mm-hmm.
so
No.
then you start to learn by that. And the reason why I do that is because it is the hardest genre, I believe, to shoot, because there's a very razor sharp fine line of it looking immature, of it looking indulgent, of it looking perverse.
Right.
Razor sharp fine line there, and there's a blur there. And when you take a lot of photographs of nudes and you're looking back on them, so, oh my God, where was my head at the time? But then you see that you're passing that razor sharp line of blurred line, and now you entered that realm of legitimate nude genre of photography.
Mm-hmm.
It's a wonderful thing because not everyone can do that.
Right.
It's the most hardest genre, I believe, that a photographer can do. Commercial photography is one thing. Documentary photography is one thing. Fashion photography is one thing. Landscape photography is one thing. Portrait photography is one thing. But nude photography is the hardest thing to do. And there's a reason why it's the hardest, because now you have an audience that's all judging you now about where your head was at and what you're shooting at.
Yeah.
And you look at photographs like Robert Mapplethorpe, which was way over the
Well, that's
top,
definitely like where's
you
your
know,
head at? I mean,
you know, but look at what his photographs are selling right
I
now.
know
And
it's
he's in the fine
incredible.
art world of one of the greatest nude
Yeah.
photographers in the world. So why is that? Why do you look at that kind of work now and then say, wow, okay, that was a very interesting place and time genre of work, of attitude. Um, you take Jan Saudek's work. You know, you take a Horse Be Horsed. You take Nan Goldman. You take a lot of these artists and you look at their nudes. Araki's work. Of bondage, of Japanese bondage. And you look at the old work of Alfred Stieglitz,
Mm-hmm.
Andre Cortez, Weston,
Yeah.
Edward Weston, one of my favorites.
Yeah.
And you look at their nudes. To me, the female body is a very beautiful form of sculpture.
To you and everyone else.
I truly believe that. Um, and when they're placed in a landscape or placed in an environment, um, where you're juxtaposing simple geometry of form against very brutalistic landscape, or whatever it have be, or even just to keep it simple, where you're in a white cyc and you're playing with light, the way light shapes around that nude sculpture of light and dark, black and white, shadow, the absence of light, and creating those shapes as an artist. It's a very beautiful, inspiring, enlightening thing to do. And then you reach a point and stage in your work. Now you want to challenge certain things. So now you place the simplicity into maybe outside environments. That's what I do now sometimes too.
Yeah.
I place my nudes in beautiful landscapes of environment. And a lot of my nudes, if not most of them, were all infrared film photography. And why I did that at the time with infrared, it made the skin milky white,
Hmm.
like porcelain, like Carrara marble. That's what infrared did. It also made the sky black. You're in the middle of the day, and all of a sudden, with infrared film, that sky is black, and your subject is milky white. And you have that contrast of black and white, that chiaroscuro feel. So, of course, you're an artist, you're a photographer, you're shooting genre of nudes right now. How could that not inspire you?
Right.
Yes, in my book, one of my greatest photographers that I love is Helmut Newton. Um,
I
what's
love
the
his
other
work
one?
as well.
Greg Gorman. Greg Gorman
Oh
is another.
yeah.
He's a very dear friend of mine. In fact,
I
in
love
that nude
Greg.
book, Greg Gorman,
I have to get
who
Greg on
who's
here.
one of my
Yeah,
heroes,
he's
he
amazing.
wrote the introduction to my book. That was done by Greg Gorman. He's still alive. You look at his
Yeah.
work, masterful at the time. Um, he still is.
Yeah.
But when I say at the time, he was doing a lot of nudes that I've collected as well. He was a tremendous inspiration to me. But you look at work of these artists, and why I do that, in a nutshell, is because it's hard. That's why I do it.
Yeah.
It's the
You're
hardest
challenging
genre
yourself.
to do, Paris. You take the greatest photographers in the world. I don't care who you are, the greatest that has not done nudes. First, there's a reason why they don't do nudes because it's difficult. And if they did do nudes, I'm sure it would take them a long time to find their voice,
Yeah.
to find their aesthetics of it not being too immature for them. That learning curve is really very difficult.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why you find your
I
niche. So
see.
that's why I do
Yeah, no,
nudes.
and I do see a lot of nudes. I always just wonder. Only thing that sometimes I wonder is a lot of times when men shoot nudes, they hardly have any nudes of other men. They only want to shoot women, which
Yes.
I think is kind of that's the only thing that I
Fair
try.
enough, Paris.
Yeah,
But
I'm like,
I
we're
will respond to that.
okay.
Um, I've also shot male nudes.
Mm-hmm.
I've also shot myself when I don't have a subject.
Right.
I've shot many photographs of myself nude, one of which is in my nude book.
Right.
And there's a reason for that, is because you realize as a photographer, a male's body, is not as beautiful as a female body. So that's one big thing right
Ask a gay
there.
man.
But I will admit, yes, but I will admit you find like a bodybuilder perhaps of a
Yeah.
male body, of a
Yeah.
male nude, of a bodybuilder that's sculptured.
Right.
That I find really very, very beautiful. Another reason is it's very difficult
Right.
to find male models. A
Hmm.
lot of male models would not want to pose nude. Women would want to pose nude more than men. So that's another reason.
Yeah. Not
So
this woman.
there's many reasons why men who shoot nudes wind up not shooting male nudes.
Yeah,
They
it's
would
because it's
want
hard.
to.
I never would have thought that it's hard to shoot
It's
nudes.
very difficult.
Well, what now? Where can people find your book?
Well,
Where? Well, we're gonna send people to your website.
that's probably first and
Yeah,
foremost. My website is my name, Crescenzo Notarile.
super easy to spell.
Uh, that's my
Well,
website.
you have to look at the end of the.
The book is a collector's item because there was only a couple of pressings of it, and there's a few boxes left, but it's not out in Amazon or
Yeah,
anything like
yeah.
that. You have to
You
reach
could get
either
them at
you.
Leica. You
You
could
have
get
to
them at
reach
Leica
you at
Gallery
Leica.
Lay. They're
Yes,
beautiful books,
yes, but it's there.
beautifully done. And so, we're going to have you back at Leica, where we have to. You were in the one show, we did the group show, but I definitely want to bring you
Thank you,
back
Paris.
now. And so I think we've got a lot of information about you, and we're going to now start stalking you, right? So,
Thank you.
I do want to ask you one last question. Are all the men super jealous of your hair? That not one, you haven't lost one strand since you were a teenager?
Apparently not.
Because your hair is so
You know,
gorgeous. I'm looking at your hair. I'm like, God, it's like
you mentioned a reference. You mentioned the name Zeus at the beginning of this
you
conversation.
do look like
But
Zeus.
you'd be surprised when I'm on the set. A lot of my crew members, you know, when I come onto the set, ready to light, whatever, they call me like Moses. Like I'm ready to split the
You look
Red
like
Sea.
Zeus. No, you
I'm
do look
coming
like
in zone.
Zeus.
You know,
I wouldn't have thought that till you said that.
but yes, and you know, it's a funny thing. You know, when people talk about my hair, I go into this one quick story
Yeah.
that you know I grew up in a household in Brooklyn, New York. You know, Sicilian parents and that kind of dynamic of upbringing in Brooklyn with a Sicilian family. And
Yeah.
my mom, when I was a small infant to a small boy, 2, 3, 4 years old, my mom used to stick my head in the sink
Hmm.
and massage my hair with warm olive oil.
Wow.
I'm not saying that's why I have the hair that I
I
do,
think it's you. It
but that's what my
might
mother
have.
did.
I love your mother. Now, did your mother also Sicilian mother? Is it true that when Sicilian mothers are mad at you, they throw their shoes at you?
My mom never threw her shoes at
Have you
me,
heard this? I heard
but
Sicilians have
my father took his
tempers.
belt off.
Oh, that's worse.
Got a little belt on my
Yeah,
rump.
I
My
heard.
mom never took his shoes off.
Yeah, I have a Sicilian friend that said that Sicilian moms are hardcore, and that when they get mad at you,
Very
they
hardcore.
throw their shoes at you. And I think I'm going to start trying that and see if it works on my son. I never threw a shoe at him. Maybe that's what I needed to do. Well, it has been a treat.
It's an honor, Paris.
No,
Thank
and
you.
thank you. And I can't wait to see you again. We'll have some fun. And
Thank you.
do you want to say, okay, so your website, we're going to put that up at the end of the show. I love you. You're the
I love you
best.
too, Paris.
And thank you for being here today.
And I have to be honest with you, Paris, and I mean this to you and to the audience. You know, you are a tremendous asset to the photography community as a whole, especially to Leica. You are a fantastic ambassador to Leica. Now to us as an ASC member, what you've done to us as ASC members to bring our
Oh,
photography
I'm going to
to the
cry.
world with
Thank
our
you.
personal work. You are a fantastic conduit for our personal work, you know, to the world. And we love you. And your
Aw.
shows are extraordinary. You are the light of all of us. You have an extraordinary personality that
I'm gonna
exude
cry.
positiveness and the collaborativeness of us as artists. And what we all love about you, it's a connection of the hearts. And I mean that not because I'm here wholeheartedly.
It's not because I paid you earlier.
And you
I
know I love you, and it tickled my
Oh,
heart that you
thank
called
you.
me to do this
Oh
interview.
God, that is the nicest
And
thing
you know
anyone's
I
ever
would
said
do
to me.
anything for you
I love
because
you.
you have a genuine appreciation. You're a giver. You're not a taker, and it's clear as day. And you're here with your audience. I love your audience, and anything I could do. So thank you,
Oh, thank you, Crescenzo.
thank you, Paris.
Oh, and thank you everyone who's been listening and subscribing and being supportive to the Paris Chong Show, especially to my crew, Don, Neil, and Zach.
Thank you for
Thank
taking good care of
you.
me. Thank you, Paris.
It's the Paris Chong Show. 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 Sit down and chat for a while. Tell me everything you know. Let's be naughty, let's be nice. It's the Paris Chong Show.